So I've been playing around with this little sketch track original idea thing today, just messing around with some still chucking some notes around. At this point I'm just searching for different ideas that might fit together into one piece, but with no real idea of what the tone of the track is actually is going to be, what the statement it's making is, and what its purpose is. None of that. It's really just messing around and feeling it out. So now I've got all these bits and bobs and ideas. Oh, here's one more. I was just playing around with some synth earlier on. And then this also, I didn't record any of this to a metronome. It was just messing around on the keyboard. And again, at this point, no real idea as to whether they get played at that tempo and I change the tempo of the track, or whether I'll make them fit in with the current tempo of the rest of the stuff. So I was messing around with the idea of going from this part here, where it goes from the D to the E. I thought maybe I would bring the melody that was being played on the guitar earlier in at that moment. So we had that. I thought that might be an interesting way to introduce that melody. So I'm starting to form ideas of kind of a potential shape of things, an order of events. So maybe at the very beginning that will be the intro, this kind of big, somewhat maybe sinister sounding, mysterious. I don't know, maybe. Probably start with this. Kind of thinking it's just starting big with an explosion on the drums and the cymbals and straight into that. Okay, let's see what happens. Alright, it's getting a bit late here now, so I think I'm going to call it a night. But I had a bit more of a chance to play with this, and starting to sound like it could actually be a track now. Become a piece of music. Just toying around with what an opening might be. Kind of got it in my head that it feels like this should be a fairly straight in track, not too much of a drawn out intro, but I often think that, and then it still ends up having a slow, long, drawn out intro. But we'll see. So this what's in my head on this part versus what's here is these notes will be there, but in terms of the structure, there's no drums, there's no noise. It will be quite a big, explosive, loud, lots of percussion, lots of cymbals, guitars ringing out over these notes. Big kind of a rock, noisy intro, but use your imagination for this bit. yeah, so that's obviously there'll be guitars playing a lot of those notes. I've just bunged it all on this one instrument for the time being. I don't know, I mean, again, I've not really got any idea of the kind of arrangement of the song, what instruments is going to be used on the track. I often like this low kind of electronic synth sound for these bass notes down here. '80s Brad Fidel, Terminator kind of sound. Yeah, just suits my tastes. So I'll probably, I mean, almost definitely try and keep those on this instrument. I really do like these drum samples. If you don't know how these drums work, if you're a non-musician or you don't work with any of this software, essentially each drum hit is recorded. They record each hit one at a time, multiple times over, and then you essentially load them up so that when I push these notes, I've got them labelled here. And that's how I do the drums. I put them in note by note. There's a kick, and these are all hats on the closed hats on this one. So then you get that kind of anyway, I think that's where I'm going to leave it for this evening. Also start trying to record a few guitars over this just to see how it fits together. Doesn't always work. Sometimes you hear stuff in this kind of electronic sound, and then when you try to put the guitars over it, it maybe just sounds noisy or just doesn't fit right. Yeah, we'll see. Cool. Anyway, that's it for now. I still haven't put any guitars in, but yeah, you get the ideas. I mean, it's gotta sound something like this. Anyway, something like that. Okay, anyway, you've heard the rest of that. And I think the lead guitars are going to come in right there, pick up on the harmonies and the melody where that sort of leads off. Maybe something like this. Not as awkwardly as that, but the key to good arrangement is about essentially getting rid of everything that absolutely does not need to be there. So if I want that drum fill to be the big moment, the big part of that moment, then I need to look at what else I can take away so it really cuts to that and draws your attention to those drums. And there'll be more noise towards this end. It's going to swell and get bigger, and then sort of the breath is almost going to have that kind of sucked in feeling, everything going outwards, and then and that's where it's going to come down to. Alright, leave it with me. Let me see what I can do. You know, sometimes that kind of stuff sounds cool, and sometimes it just sounds like you're making noise for the sake of it, but that sounded pretty cool. You gotta remember, there's no bass guitar in this yet, and this is already sounding pretty damn good. Yeah, fuck it, let's go with that. a little bit out of time, but you know, for making up on the fly and just jamming along that, not sounding bad. This is the exact same recording with two different sounding presets and pan left and right at the moment. So you've got this, and over this side, you've got this. The point I'm making is there's not much separation. They sound, because they're the same recording, on the final take it will you re-record one, you try and play it exactly the same, but it never is. There's always slight differences, and that creates a separation in the way you hear it and really separates them in the mix. So you've got this one guitar way over there, one guitar way over there, and then all the stuff down the middle, like the lead guitar, gets a nice little gap to sit in the kind of left-right audio spectrum. Some sort of a guitar scrape in there, I'm thinking. Try again. Something like that. I mean, obviously it helps when you play the right notes. Bonus tip. Here we go. Boom, boom. Just about there. I just heard a random noise in my house and I'm here on my own, so I'm gonna go check that out. Okay, gonna lay some bass down on this quickly. I'm not a bass player by any means. I'm a guitarist that owns a bass guitar. Quite a neat one actually. This is a company called Warwick. And pretty much any bass of theirs that they have a really nice rock bass tone. These are old strings. This is probably not a fantastic example, but yeah, for my needs it does the job. I'm going to run the bass through a virtual guitar amp, which is quite a neat technique to give you a pretty decent bass tone. Screw it, that'll do. Let's just record some bloody bass. We can sort this out afterwards in this section. D, 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 B to D, B to D. Alright, top tip. If you haven't picked the guitar up in months, tune it. While we're here, I did muck around with adding something like this on the beginning, but you know, I knew I wouldn't last with the straight in kind of an intro. But this may not stay there still. Things, this isn't a definite. This is a try it out for a bit, see if I like it. Yeah, so you get the idea. Something like that, maybe not. Alright. Anyway, so I recorded some of the bassings you've heard there. That's all recorded, and I messed around with it some more over here. Well, I was messing around with this earlier as well. There's some sort of ambient lead guitar sounds up here. It's not even really lead guitar, it's just some noises. Just kind of swelling on the volume knob on the guitar. I'm fairly certain this intro's probably going to remain till the finished product. I'm quite liking it now, and it's starting to feel like a story, like it's saying something, kind of. Don't know what yet. Like a decision made, or a threat made. Because you've got this quite positive, almost hopeful kind of a change here. You can't just build a track of cool sounding bits and bobs and stick them together and hope they work. You know, you're telling a story. It's got to follow some sort of pacing and flow. There really is nothing better than a good key change. I love those moments when you get to a point in a track where you kind of hit the ceiling of you'll understand this in a minute, of kind of how far it can go. You take it right to the limit at that point, then you hold it there, and then you jump the key up a few steps, and you just get the tension and release from that moment is like it's gone as far as it can, and then it bursts through that ceiling and goes even further. I think at some point later on in the track it's going to go back to that quiet moment, just like the intro. You have the drum fill as you did before, except when it all kicks back in, it will change to this key. I mean, I do that stuff all the time, but it always brings a smile to my face. I love it when you find a note, usually the third of the key you're currently in becomes the first of the new key if you go up 3 steps, and when you just hold that note over the top, like so in the key of E, that's the third note in the scale, and that becomes the first of when you change keys. That's the note that links the 2 keys. So anyway, right, here we go. Alright, I was getting fairly fed up with this earlier on today because the track had an exciting start and sounded like it was going to go somewhere, but it got to this middle section and it just kind of, everything I tried just kind of, nothing excited me. This is still very much a sketch. This is what this is going to become is very much in my head at the moment, if it works and if it becomes anything. Let's just play my sort of notes, if you like. yeah, you get the idea. I did that earlier on, that little key change part. Still not sure of it. I'm getting the most out of it, putting it right there. But so my thoughts so far on this are, for the final recording, I'm definitely gonna have to tune my guitar, just compose a little bit better what the guitars are actually going to be playing rather than these kind of improvised notes. There's some good ones in there. This part here, this kind of da-da-da-dum, probably going to be, well, obviously just bigger, more perhaps two instruments left and right, so you have the rhythm guitars on either side in the sort of mid to low area, down here, and then above that da-da-da-dum, bit more reverbed either side, some high stabs of various sorts, so it's all going to be very big and chaotic, and come right the way down, and then as the smoke's kind of clearing, da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da, that will come in. So I'm starting to feel this track a bit more now, and I mean, there's still many hours work left in it, but the end image is kind of in sight. I can't remember where we was the last time I did an update, but I've done a fair bit of rearranging, changing the sounds of certain instruments, even though the notes may remain the same. But anyway, it's almost has a start to finish now. This could be seen as the end of a track. This part here, I am tempted to extend out the section beforehand. This section here sounds like it was maybe kind of building up to something that should have continued. So my idea, you've got this bit here, just kind of playing something like that. Then it jumps up to the F, and then right at the end of that part, it sounds to me like maybe the drums should double time and it should really get going. Then maybe even once more, then finally back to, which will be this part here. That may actually flow better, but as I say, it may just be unnecessarily dragging this out. So I'm going to stick it in, leave it there for a bit. Start recording some other stuff over top it, some basses and guitars, blend it, smooth it in a bit, and yeah, but I may well end up coming back and just deleting the whole section and going back to this at the end of it. So something like this. And then obviously we'll lose that. Bring that in. So putting the 2 and the 4 back in, where previously it was on kind of the 1 every other bar. And I want to open these hats up. I'll have to vary these drums from section to section, from here to here. But again, for the time being, let's get an idea of how it flows. I think it's making sense to me at the moment. It sounds to me like where the track should go. Like I'm adding it in for the right reasons, not just because I feel like putting a faster section in. seems like it's building up to that. This is often how this goes. You stick chunks and blocks of things in, and then you work them in and you smooth them over. Using various instruments like these guitars will overlap and go into something else, and then maybe there'll be one of these other instruments that will carry over, like for instance this is the one that carries over, and although that stops there, maybe something else will come in and bring this over, so that it doesn't sound like this sudden change between sections. You want the whole thing to sound somewhat organic. So this is kind of somewhere how the end of the track's going to be going. See, this is something I put in earlier. It kind of sounded right at the time, but that just sounds meh. Let's leave that for the minute. And I did record something on the lead guitar up here, because this obviously will have guitars all over it. There's none recorded yet, but it was just me improvising, just sitting maybe here, maybe there, mainly kind of the notes over this key change. I'll play the beginning. Kind of messy, but it's mainly just kind of key points as to where I want to be at certain points, and then I have to sit and kind of sculpt out where I'm going to go in between those points, to sell you on the main kind of beats or hooks of that kind of guitar solo. What the best way to get from each section really is. It's like kind of like finding your way through the dark with these things, just feeling it out, and when something gives, when something starts to feel right, right, let's head in that direction. And sometimes it leads you to a dead end. You have to backtrack and try somewhere else and try something out. But once you finally kind of see that end in sight, you haven't quite carved out your road, but you've got some sort of plot points. You've got an idea of the start to finish journey of this this little story. At this point, the kind of per every hour of work, there'll be less and less of a noticeable difference to the end result. You've got the sections, you've got the big chunks. It will get to the point, the last kind of 5% of the track is it takes just as long as the 10% before that and the 20% before that. It really is kind of just gradually tying up more and more loose ends and messing with things down to the last detail. And you can hear there that I'm rushing a bit. When you struggle to play stuff at the right tempo, you actually tend to rush ahead and play a bit faster because you're kind of panicking to keep up. Once you've practiced it a little bit, I'll get that obviously more in time. Once I'm happy that this is actually what I want the rhythm guitar's playing, because there's no point putting a ton of effort into getting this right if I'm just going to delete it later. another time. Another time. Okay, so this whole section here is so it's an example of one of these things that I think it sounds really cool in itself in isolation, but whether or not that actually fits into the whole track is still need to decide. I hope it does, because I quite like it. But it's important not to just stick things in just because you like them. You know, it has to flow, has to work in the context of everything else. This is sounding quite like this little bass part here. It's just mimicking what the kick drum's doing down here. So this here is the all these dots here are the kick drum when they hit. So you'll hear the actual bass notes on these kick drum notes as well. So you get the idea. So I think this whole section I've kind of added in without doing any video updates. So let me kind of talk through the process of what I did here. I was talking last time about extending this section anyway. So from these strings here, and then it goes up to the F. And then what I did originally was just copied and pasted these, but moved them up. Another couple of key changes, another few steps per change. But it just sounded a little bit, well, repetitive. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it sounded like it needed to change or you know, do something else. So here's a track. So then what I did was I just was messing around and coming up with a different pattern that I quite liked. So originally I took back out all these stabs and just had this pattern. That wasn't there either. None of those notes were there. It was just it was like that. But the change from this section to this section was then a little bit too abrupt, like it was almost like a different piece of music inserted into this piece. The thing is, I'm so used to it now that it just sounds like it flows, which maybe, I mean, that's the other thing you have to be careful of as well. Sometimes it's the fact that you're just not used to it. You're so used to going from this bit here straight over to here, inserting a new chunk of audio. You know, it can sound weird. So that's the kind of the mental seesaw in your head on these points is you know, trying to figure this out. You know, does it fit or doesn't it? So anyway, to blend it a little bit more, these sections, I then put the stabs back in over the top of the new notes. That kind of sounded cool. The drums were just copied and pasted. I didn't do anything with this yet. I can't remember the exact order, but then obviously started putting in guitars. And it was quite late on. I think I might have even put in these things first before the lead guitar. It was quite late on that I decided to try this out on the lead guitar and see what it sounded like, just replicating these notes. And that, along with the strings, it sounded. I liked it. It sounded good. Oh, and then on the second half of that, instead of the guitar repeating itself, it copies these other notes. Let's grab this French horn. Alright, it's not on a French horn. Did it on a trumpet. So that was what I was messing around on the lead guitar with, a little bit of variation. This was the original take right the way through. This was the addition, but had a different ending on. I'll show you this just for fun, because I mean, the notes are all wrong, they're out of key, but there's this little change over here which, I don't know, some of you may recognise. Anyone who knows the Danny Elfman '89 Batman score will recognise that change there. I mean, sometimes it's tempting to leave these things in when you stumble across them, but I think it would have, yeah, taken you away from what you was listening to here, and every time you'll be thinking, oh, Batman, as opposed to paying attention to this. So that's why I took that out. I went back to the well, decided not to use it and just kept this original one in. Follows the backing. Oh, a little bit something about the drums quickly. So there's this wonderful drum beat that I personally, I mean, I heard of from many 80s tracks. In particular, the one that springs to mind is a track by a guy called Stan Bush, and he did a song called Take It Like a Man. You don't get song titles like that these days, do you? It's whiny, pathetic nonsense. But anyway, this was called Take It Like a Man, and it was this thing they often did, which I've heard a few times since then, but that was where I first became aware of it. Basically what I was showing you earlier on, what the bass guitar is doing, you take the kick out and you just leave the hats and the snares going. It makes it more tense. You're just building up tension for when the kick drum comes back in. And then that kind of brings a bit of the release and a bit of the flow over that key change. And it may seem like a small little detail, just that one little drum. And it's, I mean, unless it's pointed out, it's not something you'll necessarily hear, certainly on a first listen. But it's all these little subconscious changes, these things that happen that you're not aware of, that bring the dynamics, that you know, tell you what to feel and what's going on. So I mean, I think it's going to remain this section. I'm really starting to get used to it now. But it is, as I say, it's an example of one of these things that you may put all this time, effort in, and you may actually love the results of, just not in this track. You know, you may have to stick it aside and come up with another track to use it in another time, or you know, make a note of what you did and put it somewhere it does fit. The ending, I came up with this. Yeah, that's quite a cool ending. Maybe a little bit abrupt, maybe not, I don't know. Again, I'll wait and see where the lead guitar goes and if it feels like it needs more to say what it needs to say. Still amazes me when I get to this stage, kind of how much stuff you end up putting in there. It doesn't feel like it. You want to keep as much space in the mix as you can. In terms of, there's only so much an ear can hear at any one time, so you're constantly fighting for space in a mix and an arrangement, and you always feel like you're just putting the bare minimum in that you can get away with whilst doing what you want.
But I mean, if you remember, we started over here, which half of this stuff I didn't end up even using. But this was the first little sketch of ideas and seeing what a track might become. And then I think I started building out from this section here, I believe. Then added that intro onto it. It's just little by little you end up with a few minutes worth of expressive noise. It's just like a sculpture, it really is. You're just adding and taking away, more like a clay sculpture where you can add material on, but tweaking and pushing, and lots of small decisions adding up to hopefully a big overall sound. We're getting there. I just can't seem to get this thing finished. I mean, structurally it's pretty much there, and then there are days when I'm listening to this thinking, yeah, this is really great, there's some really good parts to this, and there's other days there's just lots of little things that are bugging me. I can't seem to get this bass guitar to sit right in the mix at all. When I solo the track and just listen to the tone of it, it sounds quite nice, which tells me that, but in the mix, don't know, it's either there are issues with another instrument elsewhere, or other instruments or channels elsewhere which are colliding with something that I need to get them out of the way of the bass guitar, or it's the actual recording of the bass guitar itself, the virtual amp, it's going through something fundamentally wrong with it. So the next thing I'm going to try and do is just stick some fresh strings on the bass guitar, which I'm not sure that will solve it, because the main thing you get with new strings is a much brighter, attackier sound, and the issue I've got is more with the lower end. There seems to be plenty of attack and jangliness for my tastes from this recording, but you never know, there might be something. I don't think it will hurt, so I'm going to chuck on some fresh strings on the bass guitar, re-record it, and then I'm going to try running it through different amps and preamps. Okay, I think I'm finally at the point where I can call this track done. I can't even remember how long it's been since I did the last video update on this. I've been struggling to get this mixed for about 3 weeks now. There is stuff that's changed, but it's been such tiny little incremental things I've just noticed along the way. But the main focus has been, for about 3 weeks, trying to get this mixed, and it has given me so much trouble. So frustrating having something that's essentially done, but just the technical phase of it. Yeah, the low end of this mix, as with most of my mixes, always gives me problems. Again, I think it might be something to do with the room I'm in, but it didn't turn out to really be that in the end. It's this strange thing. The program I'm using here is called Reaper, and as I've mentioned probably a few times now, I'm quite new to it. And the built-in, there might be something I'm missing. I might be just ignorant to the way this works. But the built-in EQ almost seems to act like a parallel EQ. So if you, I can show you here on something. So this is the built-in Reaper standard EQ, and you've got your frequency spectrum here, and you can cut and boost either of these frequencies to do what you want to do to shape the sound. And for a lot of the sounds for the way I mix anyway. I want to get rid of a lot of the low end and leave that space for the bass guitar and the kick drum. So I'm doing all my usual kind of EQ moves, cutting away at certain frequencies and high passing things, which is where you just kind of get rid of the low end completely. And for some reason it still wasn't working. There's a couple of problem frequencies that I'm aware of in this room that I know need really crushing on certain things, like things like the lead guitar. There shouldn't really be anything, not really below 100, but certainly there shouldn't be any prominent things around 150 hertz. And I get this weird thing in this room where when I hit certain notes I get this spike around there. And I was doing all the usual things with these EQs and with multi-band compression, trying as hard as I could to get rid of those. At points just completely cutting them away using this EQ built into Reaper. And this is kind of a lesson to trust your ears and not trust what the plugins say, because there was still a lot of issues going on in the low end. So I thought, well, it can't be the lead guitars, it can't be anything in the high end. I've cut all that away. It must be the low end, must be with the bass guitar. Messed around with that for an incredible amount of time. In the end, I actually, at one point on the bass guitar, I actually went through, completely rolled off the low end, just kept the top end of my the recorded bass guitar to get the strings and the articulation, and I went through and programmed on a MIDI instrument here all of the bass notes exactly as I played them. So if I solo this is just a virtual instrument. Yeah, and what I was doing with that was getting rid of the top end on that and just keeping it for that low end presence, so I could use purely the low end from that sound mixed in with the high end from my recorded bass sound, and that actually improved things because it's more even. There's less dynamics in it, but I still had issues. And eventually, I thought, I'm sure I can still hear something going on in the low end, even though I've completely got rid of it on those other instruments. So I decided to try a different plugin, a different EQ, a third-party one. I found this fantastic free one I absolutely love now. So this is the silver lining to this 2 or 3 weeks of stress has led me to this kind of other plugin. Same idea. Again, I thought all EQs were the same, but you've got this frequency spectrum, different points in it you can push up and down. This one, for anyone who's into music out there, is called TDR Nova. This also you can use as a multi-band compressor, so you can activate a compression mode on any of the bands of EQ, so you can use it as EQ and as a combined multi-band compressor, which is just fantastic. That's come in really handy. And I A/B'd it. I put the Reaper EQ on and I put this EQ on with the same cut and the same settings, and just went back and forth, and there was definitely a little bit more low-end noise and rumble still in the when I used the Reaper one. And that, I think, has pretty much ended up solving my issues. Yeah, just switching the EQs out, then mixing as I usually would. And I'm pretty deaf to this mix at this point. It's good enough. I might look back at this and even think it's a really good mix later on. But for now, it's just, when you hear something so much, you just you need a break from it for a couple of months if you can, and I don't want to do that. I just want to get this one done now. Along the way, I haven't done any video updates because every time I made a slight change, it wasn't enough to really warrant doing an update over. However, over that length of time, I think they've kind of added up to significant changes to the last update, mainly to the intro. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. I changed it to this kind of more piano sound. I mean, the synths might have sounded okay, but again, because I heard this so much, I just got kind of sick of it, and the intro wasn't really doing anything for me, so I started searching around with other instruments, and I stumbled across this plugin here. Again, another free one. I love the amount of free plugins you can get, and it's kind of like it's called Toy Keyboard, and it kind of reminds me of the kind of piano sounds I used to have an old Yamaha, one of my first ever keyboards, and my parents got it for me for one of my birthdays, and it was like it might have been something like a PSR 220, something like that. And I mean, at the time I thought it was fantastic, it was amazing, but obviously compared to the way sampling and virtual instruments have come along since then, It's not a realistic piano, but there's something that I still quite like about the tone of it. It actually kind of reminds me of about 2000s era kind of Gary Newman, like the Pure album. He has a certain kind of tone to the piano that he uses, and it reminded me of that. I think that's why I liked it. But the low end notes on this sound fairly awful, so I actually combined it with a more realistic piano. So I use that for the bass notes in the intro around this bit here, while the toy keyboard played over the top, and I just like the combination of those two. As with any mix, with any piece of music, the instant I upload this to YouTube, I'll be finding problems with it and things I could have done to improve it, but that's the way it works. Every time you finish a piece of work, that's a recording. It's just a stamp of where you was at that moment in time, of your abilities and your thoughts and your ideas. So there's no point keep trying to second guess it. You just got to call things done at a certain point when they're good enough, when any changes you make will be kind of trivial and not really transformative of the whole piece. This has been a lot longer. It's taken a lot longer than I thought it was going to at the beginning. It kind of was moving along fairly quickly, and the actual writing of each section happened fairly smoothly. I just cannot believe how long this mix has taken. This is the mixing stage is the sort of thing, if I was doing this for a commission or professionally, if this had some money behind it, then I would absolutely pay to have it mixed. I would pay someone to work with me. It's not my area of expertise at all. I've learnt to mix because I've had to, but my ears aren't great at detecting problem areas and things that I'm searching around for days on end for. Someone really who knows what they're doing, who has a better ear for it than me, can probably spot straight away. It's no good taking this long over a track when you've essentially got the thing done weeks before. Oh well, it's done now. It's finished.